All right, thanks, dude. I'll see you in 20 minutes. Whatever. You doing another area?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'd rather have an engineer in some way, shape, or
No, it was a learning experience.
Everyone's kind of a good.
A lot of turnout.
I thought turnout was great. We're still not sworn in, so.
Yeah.
County's still doing
That's
something.
another reason why we would like to see official beneficiaries.
So apparently they came at 20.
I think the picture was starting here versus starting.
I just see no point in doubling up. You'll have two pads. One gas and one more change right next to each other. Makes no sense.
But,
Except the engine. The paved and engineered. We're talking about a concrete path and an aggregate path next to each other.
Up by the park, that little purple, what do they call that? The pirate spot?
Yeah, I wasn't answering.
All hours of the day. That's right. I saw people this morning. I understand where you live. Scott, you said yes.
Scott, there's an opening on the committee. I mean,
I think I said that.
I know. I think you did say that. That's why
I tried to plug it.
reinforcing for you.
Hey, I'll shamelessly plug it. If they've got passionate to talk about these things, come on and talk about them. Thank you.
I don't know why we print 9 copies. There's not 9 of us anymore.
I'm sure it's habit.
Is Sandy? Did I hear Sandy is sitting in tonight?
Yeah, she didn't get appointed. They didn't get sworn in yet. So she's still
Hey, thanks for coming out.
until they swear. Oh, the election is not certified.
I'll see you.
I used to that show all the time. I always think it's funny because I come down that thing. There's always like kids.
Patrick, did you just write all those up? Peter. What? Peter.
Did it before the public
I
engagement.
grouped mine. We were all grouped. There's 14 of them the same kind of connotation. It's just what's the name?
Still haven't seen the one that's like.
Oh, I know.
Still waiting for that one to hit. Or even the 2 or 3.
I don't know, but it was packed out there.
It was packed.
Like this weekend, it was just like people lined up. How many people were here? I forgot about it. I got home and changed and came, and I'm like, oh yeah. As I pulled into the parking lot, I was like, oh yeah.
That's gay. It was a. It was a.
Oh really? I didn't. I just heard you chat when I came in, so I kind of missed it.
There was a couple of passionate people
About not wanting it.
about County Ridge and the trail that we knew was controversial. Why are you trying to purposely mess up our area? These things aren't set in stone. These things are what we're proposing, and we have this outreach of what you know our rationale for it, so you just don't say we're trying to ruin everybody's life. That's good. It's really funny how
I heard you like giving the speech, and I was like, wow, I must have missed a good one.
people get emotionally charged.
I get to be here for one more day,
One more meeting.
one more meeting, and then I'll be sitting over there from then on.
Where in that seat?
No, because I'm my trustee, Chris is given up as trustee liaison, and I'll be the trustee liaison for PROSTAC. So.
Oh, really? I was.
You were really hoping you'd
I was
get rid of
hoping
me,
we'd get
didn't
rid of
you?
you, and
No.
now I got to deal with you more. Huh?
No, he didn't even fight me for it. It
You
was
know,
like,
have we ever had a purple hair trustee before?
I don't believe so. you know,
I'm
I'm
waiting for
pretty
the
sure
orange hair. Heck
there's,
with the purple.
you know, I don't think there's ever been a purple haired one. And the other, I don't think there's ever been a trustee who represented multifamily unit community. They've always been from regular, you know, single family houses. So, but we're sure there's never been anybody with purple hair. We're confident.
That's why you dyed it purple, just so you'd be unique?
No, because the orange fades too fast.
I just gotta check, you know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So, Sandy, because George isn't here, if we do want to vote on anything, we would have to vote. But I don't know if you want to.
Well, Patrick said I should recuse myself.
Yeah, so we'll
But,
have to make a
but you know
decision.
what? I could recuse myself probably on the trustee vote.
So if we have to vote on something tonight,
Do we have?
they need me, if they need me.
Yeah, what,
So if I were to vote tonight,
are
could
you
I
thinking in terms
recuse?
of the name, if we were to come up with a recommendation to send?
Name and work plan.
I think the work plan done tonight.
I'm hoping.
You sent it out at
You know,
midnight
'cause
last night.
could I recuse?
Well, I think.
I printed it really big.
Which format you would want to recuse yourself, and whether you do that as a trustee or here.
Well,
If they
saw
want to
it when I
wrap it up
landed,
tonight,
so-
I'm happy
Yeah,
to
what's
vote,
that?
and I
I
can
landed at, like,
recuse
midnight
myself
last
on
night.
this
Right.
trustee
Yeah,
vote.
there it is.
Because it's probably not going to be I could still comment. I just
Absolutely.
couldn't vote.
Right, and I think you would just explain, these were items that we worked on while I was an active member of PROSTAC, therefore,
I should
my
recuse myself.
support.
Yeah.
Because I think if the committee's recommending it, it's obvious that you as the committee is in support of it.
I'm in support of
So
it.
recuse yourself from the other end.
Yeah, I would
As
recuse
long as
myself on the
there's,
trustee
as long
side.
as, I think, you know, there's not the perception that you're kind of hitting it from both sides, I think that's absolutely.
Okay.
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 All right. So going to call to order the meeting of PROSTAC, November 16, 2016. We just had our public engagement on the trails. Do we have any other public comment? No. Okay. So we're going to move forward with our agenda items. The first is just, we're going to have a recap discussion of what we just heard with the trails D and G south of Colton. I think it's pretty clear that, I mean, we're not going to make any decision on these tonight, especially since we have a questionable quorum. So, if any, I mean, does anyone have any discussion? Anyone have any comments on what we just heard?
Can you do a quick just overview?
Okay,
for
yeah,
those
so
of
yeah,
us,
you weren't
the
all
couple
here.
that weren't
So,
all here for the
so
whole
the
meeting?
concern, the concern over Trail G, which is the one that's going to connect from Pirate Park into Coyote Ridge.
Right. Switch back.
The primary concern there was there's already a lot of social trails. Why do we need another trail connection? Why spend money on a trail that a couple of the members of the public felt wasn't necessary?
Okay.
So we just tried to explain that, the social trails, we don't really have any control over. They weren't engineered to begin with. Our desire is to see an engineered trail that's going to be more sustainable in the long run for erosion, better for the environment.
I think at the end, though, he actually came out and said his exact motivation. His exact motivation is that the one who was the most vocal about it, he didn't mind if the trail went behind that ridge there. He didn't want it on top because he didn't want people to be able to look into his house, into his bedroom. He said that's his biggest concern.
Yeah.
And that's why he was saying it under the guise of, well, we already have a trail there, but when he came and talked to us afterwards, it was more, I don't want anybody on top of the hill looking into my bedroom, which I can understand.
Yeah, and yeah, he lived on Vinca, so he currently has the paved path behind him that's level with his house, but this would be
Elevated.
elevated above, but the path as designed would not be running right on the ridge, it would be set back from the ridge.
Okay.
So that concern, I believe, would largely be negated by the fact that they're further away from the homes than maybe he was initially thinking. So hopefully, that concern goes away. But that was the only resident we heard from. And then Brian's comment, you were concerned just about the expense and the, how does it fit in the priority of other trails, correct?
Yeah, and I echo what that more
Yeah.
local
Okay.
resident mentioned too. If it's not road wide, fix it. Wait till level 3 or whoever moves in there puts up a fence or takes some sort of action that stops the use of the existing social trails.
Okay.
And then
Yeah. And so moving on to Trail D, the one behind the houses on Opal and on, we actually only heard of the ones from Opal. What's the other street on the south side? Are those houses on
Amethyst, I believe?
Amethyst? Yeah. So we didn't hear from anyone that lived on that side. But also kind of echoed the same concern of, we would rather you build the trail on the east side of McCaslin and wait and see if people are really cutting through the Greenway versus just assume they're going to cut through the Greenway and build the trail now. So, and also they're just concerned of, basically no one's going back there now and they like it that way. It's nice that way, keep it that way, as well as some concern over the being the low point and
The grading,
and the drainage concerns. But that's why that path would be concrete. It would be built to sustain the drainage concerns. It would be built with the drainage concerns in mind. So we just tried to explain that. So again, we had a vocal minority on both of them that were opposed. But then we had, on Trail D, we also had another resident who lives on Torrey's Peak who very much favored having that connection. So in that case, we did have an opinion on each side for that trail, so. Any other thoughts or questions if you weren't here?
I guess my only question, Patrick, is with the funding for these, I mean, if you split them apart and do one and then one in the future, is that it'll be a different price?
We
Right.
probably have some economies of scale if we did all these trails at once, right?
Not so much Coyote Ridge, just because I think you'd have mobilization at either site because you're spread out.
Right.
I think if you
Up
look
and down
at,
McCaslin is.
yeah, if you look at kind of separating out the McCaslin Trail connections too much, I think you'd lose a little bit of the economy of scale. I think as we've discussed it with the guys from Loris doing the design, is for the board's request, they are going to be designed individually.
Okay.
But I do think there's a lot of benefit in having them bid as one complete
That's right.
project. Now, that's not to say that if the board wants to eliminate one of those kind of legs, the one that goes behind the homes on West Torrey's or the ones over by Opal, that we couldn't just pull those right back out.
Right.
And still shoot with the trail going down the chasm.
Now, I actually have a question for you, Patrick, on the Trail G.
Uh-huh.
Since that is more of just a single track trail, would we have the opportunity if Loris laid out the trail, that we could potentially get volunteers or youth corps or something to actually do a large amount of the work? I mean, if it were literally staked out, I mean, that's more just, at that point, just the labor of digging that single track. There's not a lot of technical work once you get the design
Correct.
done, correct?
Other than when you cross over the gully, which may take some minor engineering, I think it would be a fantastic either National Day of Service project or a standalone project. I think, you know, we could even go up with a deck mower and do the initial mow, so we're not dealing with stakes, and then have just people in there with the shovels and picks, and you put it together like you would any other single track.
So, I mean, if we really get more of a concern over cost, that one has the option to be lower cost than some of the other trails that we're looking at. So we'll have to, you know, talk with OSAC, decide if we want to have another public engagement on these trails, maybe in January, and reach, you know, wait till then, probably wait till January either way to make any recommendation on these. Ken?
Patrick, is there any information about when these ones will be more put out to bid, so you guys will put final numbers to it? I mean, there could be cost prohibitions on the one that goes green system.
My guess is we're kind of post-Thanksgiving on the McCaslin trails.
Okay, so January would be a good time.
Trail G is done. I mean, the alignment's there. I can't think that trail would be that much, especially if we had volunteers. Just kind of throwing out big, broad numbers. Trail C with the connection points along McCaslin, it's going to be expensive. You're going to be north of $500,000, if not more. Just because it's so long,
Yeah.
and there's some significant grading issue as you get down there.
North McCaslin, is that what you said?
No, the one on the Indiana to Colton leg.
Oh, okay.
Especially because what
you said
Patrick's referring to is the
Yeah.
Long one?
the
Okay.
goalie there that's just kind of northwest
Right.
of Fire Station
Right.
Park.
Yep.
Getting over that.
Okay. Yeah, and it's the connection back to, it's the development there.
Yeah, Calmonte.
Calmonte,
there you
yeah.
go.
Well, and you know, something that we're looking at. So this actually isn't the best map. Let me kind of do Google Earth.
So while that's pulling up, one other question, I guess. So the Coyote Ridge access by Pirate Park is just all single track, no concrete or crusher fines. It's just kind of a cut-in single track, right?
Mhm.
And then does that integrate with the slide?
Well,
Embankment?
it would get you the ADA because of the
Access.
slope access to the top of the embankment slide,
Okay.
which is
So that's covered.
yeah. We're kind of getting like a double whammy with that one because it would be providing the access to the top of the embankment slide as well as the continuation of the trail connection to the Coyote Ridge Loop.
Okay. Yep, perfect. You're speeding. Slow down. Jumped into the neighborhood now.
Come on.
And this one, we're looking at that one being crusher fines or concrete?
The board,
Crusher fine.
board's requested all trails be priced as both.
As both?
Get a
As
price option
either,
for
you
crush
know,
fine and
for
and all
either
item.
or.
And either or,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so
Though I would assume if they did decide to do concrete, they would probably have the crusher fine band on the edge.
the board actually hasn't been in favor of any crusher fine trails.
Really?
Wash out too easy.
Yeah. So this is the gully. So thought was, bring the trail this way. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Bring the trail back, so there's the existing trail down by these trees, right behind the homes. And you'd kind of come out roughly about right here. But what's interesting is there's a huge culvert that sits probably
It's right there.
right here, somewhere. to get the width of the trail, we're looking at like a 9+ foot retaining wall, right? So I think at that point, the trail does become cost prohibitive. So something that we've asked the design guys to take a peek at is come off the toe of this, build this hill here. You can see the existing trail, and figure out a way
Wrap it down.
to wrap it down and come up and connect here. Because I just can't see, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know that anybody's really in favor of a 9+ foot retaining wall to deal with that drainage culvert. So we're gonna have a couple of design options on this one to kind of negotiate. And then just for everybody, let's see how far. Did I already pass the green space?
Yep. You went shooting by. You're way up there.
Yeah.
Are you referring to Trail D?
Yep.
No, that's,
No,
that's the,
Let's see.
Trail C, which is gonna run the length of McCaslin from Indiana to Colton. The Trail D would bisect it, would connect into like the
Perpendicular.
middle of it,
Oh.
basically as a
It's
connection.
right there.
There's the green
Yeah.
space with
Which,
the homes in between.
And just to be clear to everyone, one of the residents said there's still water out there right now, even though it's been so dry. I walked it like 3 hours ago, it's dry. So yes, I'm sure they do have the water concerns. I'm
Well,
not saying
the-
those don't exist, but
Right.
I think they were trying to overstate it a little bit.
Those several of those residents daylight their sump pumps into the town's green space. That's what that, because
Yeah.
we haven't had irrigation on over there for quite a while.
Yeah, I walked it today, it's dry. So, not to say it can't be a problem, but it's
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
always a problem.
Yeah.
It can dry out.
Yep. It is, we had it off for almost 3 weeks this summer, trying to dry it out for the El Dorado irrigation connection. Just couldn't get it to dry out. And a lot of that's just the sump pump discharge from the homes into the green space.
Has the consensus changed on that we might want to build that? I know there was at one point a big concern about even trying to do it.
On that trail.
Yeah, between the houses.
Well, that's one of the ones we just talked about.
I know, I understand that.
Yeah, and so we heard both sides of it. We heard
Right, yeah,
a resident that was adamant that they liked the connection, and then a resident who's saying that he has a bunch of other residents agreeing with him, adamant that they don't like it.
But
and-
from the beginning, it's kind of been a questionable,
Yeah,
do
and
we really want to try this? Is this
It's-
something we want to do? Is it?
the vocal, and it really truly is a vocal minority because it's only about 6 houses that border it. Those are the ones that are objecting it because
Right.
it's in their backyard,
No, no,
essentially.
As
The
well as,
engineering on it was gonna be problematic.
Well, that's why it would be
Well, that's it right there.
paved,
So
and
just
they have to
really,
do some
really quickly,
irrigation.
there's a mess of utilities in here. You've got sanitary sewer, you have storm.
Yeah, there's a couple storm
yeah.
accesses that sit up above
So,
grade.
in looking at it, this is the swampy side of the hill. A lot of the water discharge happens from the homes over on this side. This is kind of the swamp down here as well. And the town is, as much as we can, have tried to do some drain mitigation. You'd have to have a retaining wall right here, thick black line. Due to the moisture coming from these homes, we would probably end up needing to do kind of a rip-wrap kind of swale. And then what we would probably do is try to take as much of that drainage and just tie it directly into the sanitary sewer.
Let me ask you this, Patrick. Are they legally allowed to drain into the open space? Because like the HOA has restrictions on you draining into your neighbor's property.
We just don't have.
Like you're not allowed to do it. So are they legally allowed to drain into the town's property? Or are they supposed to be mitigating that?
It's
This-
so, I would, my.
This exact concern is one that's specifically addressed in the HOA
Right.
covenants.
So my quick answer is no, they're not supposed to daylight onto town property.
Yeah.
The long answer is so many people do it throughout town, and we have no way to enforce it and control it with the staff resources that we have.
But it doesn't mean that that we couldn't enforce it here if we know that it's going to add substantial cost to the town.
You could, yeah. I think something we've talked about a lot is once you go down that route, being prepared to do it throughout town. I would love to have a way to enforce people not to daylight their sump pumps onto our green space. I think it'd be fantastic.
I think one of the options is okay.
Sure.
You can open, just add it to public comment.
Not to get off topic, but since Peter asked the question, how much does it cost to discharge sump pump water into your sewer line? Because that is an option for residents. It's a no-fee permit. And, I mean, $300, so.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know how many homes in this problem area do that. Even if the town said, hey, we have this problem, we will pay the
Well,
cost to do this.
but that opens up, if Patrick's saying a lot of people do it, they might want like 3 or 4 people here to do it, but they're not going to offer, I wouldn't think, offer the pay, because then there could be 100 other houses that are doing it into open space that could then say, well, why aren't you paying for mine? You raise a good point. I just don't think the town would agree to pay. What they could do is, if those residents are doing it illegally, they could enforce that and say, you need to stop doing this, here's one of your options. But the resident would be on the hook to do it. But if they're not supposed to be doing it now, they're not supposed to be doing it.
So Patrick, overall, I mean, the point that's contested or that's questionable is this link between Torrey's and Indiana, right? Or Torrey's and McCaslin?
Mm-hmm.
And the link along the school, is that something that is looked at being installed?
The school's not interested in us having a trail on their property.
Right, I mean, just,
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially,
I'll come back to that one later.
It essentially exists right now.
Right, there's a
And
little
there's a
sidewalk. out there.
sidewalk, and
Yeah,
then,
that was
But there's
met
not-
with heavy resistance. So-
Right, and just
and just so everyone knows, the kids are hopping the fence to get to the park.
already. Yeah. Well, yeah, even last weekend, there was lots of people asking, how do I get to the school from here?
They were doing it
Tell
this
them
afternoon.
to ask the
Don't be
school.
saying I told you so.
No, but my daughter was the one that pointed it out to me today. She's like, the kids are hopping the fence.
I think the response we got from the school district on both fronts is, no, we will not probably be pursuing the trail from here to here on the school's property. And the reason why the connection hasn't been made between the park and the school is the school's decision at this point, because they are going to turn this into a construction site, and it will be fenced off anyway in the very near future. So that's.
Until after the school
It is.
construction.
Because that's where they're building it.
They're not saying for sure, but I think they're trying to kick the can
The-
to
Down
that
the road.
point in time.
The town would
and they'll
love
make
to
a
have a
decision
connection between
then.
the park and the school.
Yeah.
But that is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is good, to not have the connection then.
All right, so if there's
Okay.
no other questions or comment, we'll move on.
Peter, can I just comment on one thing? Just
Sure,
as our,
Tricia.
Tricia Dunham, Vice Chair of PROSTAC. I just want to say our meeting wasn't recorded last week, but one of the things that I think ties to this and potentially your work plan was we talked about wayfinding.
Yeah.
Adding that as an ongoing thing. So one of the things with this one going between, from our perspective, is if we're not going to do it and we don't want people there, then we should probably sign it at some point if we think it's really not a viable trail to go through. And I think some of that came up tonight in this engagement of social trails and
Yeah.
that. And one of the things that Ken and I talked about is, as we look in December for our education opportunities, that might be something we try to look at next year, of how to educate the community about staying on trail, or what the consequences are of going off. But we did want to tell you about the wayfinding that we added to our work plan as something that we might want to look at next year. Just wanted to let you guys know that as well.
Sure. Yeah, and that's been on our work plan as kind of a waiting item, because the town, this was a town project that hasn't moved forward, but it's been in talks for a year or two. So, yeah. But to say you can't walk through the Greenway, that would be unprecedented in town. Because I tried to make the point to that one resident, if you go, if you don't know the town walking it, if you just go to Google Earth, there's like one other Greenway that does not have a trail. That I'm talking about ones that run behind homes, not like, there's some places where there's a little one that juts between two houses, and those don't always have paths. But pretty much every green belt in town, with the exception of one behind Rogan and Riverbend, I think, has a path through it. It's almost unheard of in Rock Creek to have a green belt that has no path in it. There's dozens of them like this that have paths in them. So I don't think we would promote closing it off to.
I just meant if it eventually becomes such a
Yeah.
wet, just the things, just thinking about with the wayfinding that.
Sure.
It might be something that would come up, so it certainly has to be all looked at.
Okay. Thanks. All right, so let's move on to item number 2, the school parcel park naming. So last month we asked for a top, I can't remember if it was 5 or 10 names from each member, and then Corey submitted his afterwards. And so on the board here, hopefully everyone can see it, is Eagle's Nest is the only name that had more than 2 people agreeing with it. Actually had 4 of us had that on the list. El Dorado Park, Grandview, Peak Park, and Wildflower Park all had 2 in common, and then the rest was just one of us named, picked those names. So I don't know if we want to go with like a top 5 to push onto the board and say, and we can make that a prioritized list or not. We could say this is our number 1 choice, and we can list a reason. Or we could narrow it down, just do, like I say, a top 3, and be a little bit more adamant of, these are our favorites. That's the way I see going. I think the bigger question at this point is, do we want to pick a name that relates to the school or not? Especially since, if we're picking a name such as Eagle's Nest, and eagle being the school mascot, how many people really realize that that would be related to the school? Because if you don't have a student going to school, do you realize that the school's mascot is an eagle? So do we want to pick names that have Eagle or El Dorado in the name? Or do we want to just say we don't want to relate the name to the school and exclude those names and move on to the rest of the list?
Well, I think there's another option we should consider, is whether we just think we should push this back until the spring, after people have had an opportunity to hang out in the park and open it up again. I don't think the board is that, I can't speak for the board because I'm not officially on it yet or anything, but I just think it's premature to put a name on it yet. And, maybe we just say to the board, we think we should leave it open for another few months so people have an opportunity to experience the park.
So Well, there's two things there. One, would that mean we leave open or reopen the naming contest? And two, Patrick, you had expressed something concerning the contract with the construction contract had the cost of the sign in the name, and so therefore it had to be taken care of
To a certain time period.
sooner
Well,
rather
I
than
mean,
later,
it-
right?
It just, the project wouldn't close out in April, which is, I mean, it's not the end of the world. That, they are on the hook when we create the name, they're on the hook to put that in, that was part of the contract.
But that doesn't sunset at some point, like if they finish the project and it's 6 months
No.
later, they're gonna, are
It's
they?
just, it's on everybody's books, but that's not
Okay,
a huge deal.
okay.
Yeah, but Sandy, you're not talking about pushing it, you're just saying, let's make this in February or March for the April opening.
Yes.
Yeah, the board.
Yes.
We're not
Right.
pushing back the opening, we need to have the name before the opening.
Yeah, no, and I'm saying like,
Okay, I just
because
wish I
if the
could
kids
finish.
have an opportunity and everybody has an opportunity to experience it for several months,
Right.
there might be a new name that pops into mind. I mean, it's a pretty exciting park, and I just think people will start feeling things about the park. And so I would say, you know, leave it open and ask for more names in February. Say we didn't really, we just decided point blank that we wanted to leave it open and give people an opportunity to experience it and then maybe make a decision at the February meeting.
So what's everyone's opinion on waiting to decide on a name, as well as what's your opinion on relation to the school? And so Sandy, what's your opinion in relation to the school?
My opinion is we should not have it affiliated with the school. The school is not, you know, I'm not picking on the school, but this park really has nothing to do with the school, other than the fact that the land was Boulder Valley School District land, and they eventually gave it to us. They didn't want it. And so I really think that it should not have anything to do with the school. We don't have a lot of eagles cruising around in Superior, so if we're going to do anything, I'd rather say, let's try hawk. We got a lot of hawks. So I would say no to the affiliation with the school.
Corey?
Well, I think that in looking at the long list of names that was submitted, there's just a lot of the school kids were allowed to go in and go through the contest via a class. And there was a lot of Eldorado Eagle, whatever,
Soaring.
based on
yeah.
the school's mottos and mascots and things like that. So therefore, you know, there was a lot of tie to the school because of it is right next door, and there was a lot of participation by the kids. So to an extent, I think I like the fact of pushing it back and allowing potentially users of the park to experience it and come up with a new name and have that opportunity of being in the park and saying, you know, yeah, there is a great view, or, you know, there's certain features about the park that, you know, really resonate and give it a good solid name. I don't think it should be tied fully to the park or to the school, because it is fairly separate. It is a separate park by the town of Superior, and to an extent, there's also been there's a lot of, we wanted to tie it to the school more, and it's been pushed away. So it's almost, you know, kind of one of those, why are we going to name it after the school when they're pushing it to be separate?
Mhm.
You know, I just hate to put it that way, but it's kind of the way it is.
Okay.
Anyway, and for me, there was two kind of distinct segments of names. It was school-based names and Vista-based names,
Yeah, like
or
View,
views
yeah.
and Mesa, you know, just whatever. There, as you can see, there's just a lot of about the geography versus the mascot.
Mhm.
So anyway.
Corbett?
So I'm gonna talk in about a bunch of circles here, so see if you can follow along.
It's all right, I tried not to, but.
I am 100% agreement that we push it off until later and let the kids play with it and maybe come to a better idea of what the name should be. As far as if we don't, whether we tie it to the school or not, I'm not, you know, I really have no strong opinion whether we tie it to the school. We tie things either to a feature of the park a lot or to a geographical location. Fire Station Park. Why do we call it Fire Station Park? It's close to the fire station.
Close.
Pirate Park. Why did we call it Pirate Park? It has a pirate ship in it. So a lot of them are named in those things. So, you know, the fact that it's close to the school itself lends itself to the name of El Dorado Park, not an eagle, not something affiliated with the school, just the name El Dorado Park because it's tied to it. So I can see it from that perspective.
But
I don't. But to tie it purposely to eagle soaring or any of that thing, you know, with the school itself, I don't see. The only thing I kind of see is, which I mentioned to Sandy the other day, is that, you know, that the big climbing structure does kind of look like a nest.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to,
It
if you
was
want to do
full this weekend.
and it was full,
Yeah.
and so, you know, if you're
It's
looking
full
for
this
a,
afternoon.
if you're looking for a feature of it, that, you know, it's either Zipline Park or it's Nest Park or whatever, something like that. And I could see again, but if you do Nest, you may not want to tie it. It may inadvertently be tied because of a feature in it. I know I just talked in a bunch of circles, so my recommendation is still that if we tie it to the school, it's only by geographical location that it's El Dorado, but I have 100% agreement that I think we should push it to February and try to get more entries after kids have actually used it and become more comfortable with it. And we may find out that a lot of kids who are using it are the kids who are living in that area who kind of identify it with the school anyways because of the
Well,
geographical location.
And I think that's going to be the challenge in general, is the people are just going to call it El Dorado Park.
I think it is. Yeah.
Because of that. But just to point out your, like, the Fire Station Park, I don't think any naming process existed. I think the developer probably named those parks.
No,
Or they just naturally, they got those names. Yeah, like, there was no naming process, so I think
Yeah.
it was lazy
I don't
that
think that
those
they-
parks got those names.
I don't think they have an official name
don't
on
have
a lot of
official.
those.
we
Yeah.
don't have official names for our parks other than Purple and Community and Founders.
Yeah.
Because if you
they-
go into Google and somebody tries to get to Community Park, they'll have a hard time getting there.
Because other people
they're
think
not
Fire Station
registered.
Park is called Red Park.
People have told me.
Because the
getting to
play
games from
structure,
out of
I
town,
guess,
they're
is
like,
red, and they think
we
that
didn't know
the
where we were
Purple
going.
Park, because of the color thing, you know, like, they think, oh, that's Purple Park, that's Red Park. So, anyway.
Same with open space. We don't have formal names for open space either.
Ron?
I would concur exactly what you just told. I was gonna say, with my 17-year-old daughter said it best. I go, it's kind of dumb that you guys are even worried about it, because it's gonna be called El Dorado Park.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we name it, unless we can come up with something dynamic that, as you say, maybe fits a structure or something, fits a nice bill, and everybody can remember that name. People still have a hard time not calling this Target Park. Sorry. That's what the kids refer to, as the park by Target. So, I mean, again, so I agree on the holding off, because we don't have a clear, definitive name, and it's gonna be El Dorado Park. At the end of the day, it's probably gonna be El Dorado Park anyway.
And I hate to say it, but it's been named El Dorado Park for a year or two during development anyway.
That's,
Dorado
that's why
Park.
I've always tried to call it School Parcel Park, for that exact reason of not tying El Dorado to it.
Well,
But,
staff was given direction to call it the new town park to even remove the school connotation from it.
yeah. But, so my thought on postponing is, if we're gonna open it back up, the naming contest back up, I would be okay postponing it. If we're not gonna open the naming contest, I would actually rather place the name on it now for the purpose of trying to avoid El Dorado Park taking hold. If we can get the board to appoint a name, even if the official name isn't until April, if the board will pick a name in January and we can start calling it whatever park, then that can maybe challenge that adaptation, that acceptance of El Dorado Park. But that would be my only reason to pick a name now, is to try to get a foothold for that name as soon as possible. As far as tying it to the school, yeah, I mean, I agree. The school has not really been working with us. Why tie it to the school? We can probably come up with a more creative name. As much as I do kind of like the names Eagle's Nest, and the climbing structure kind of is like a nest, there's other names on there I would be equally as happy with, as well as maybe some names that we haven't come up with that I could be equally as happy with. I'm not committed to the school either, so. Tricia?
I just want to mention one thing about the Eagles
Yeah, you said this.
That's Hitler's vacation home.
Right.
So I just want to point that out, just 'cause when I started, that was the first connotation. I understand all of the mascot, and I understand it looks like a nest. I prefer peacock nest over eagle nest then, just because I think it's something that could be done and then have,
Just nest.
you know,
Yeah.
push back after you
No, I
go through
understand.
all the processes that somebody might look and say, wow. You know, I understand we're in a different part of the country and, you know.
Yeah, and like-
Eagles, like, I understand your point
Yeah.
totally, and I think it's.
And see, I hear Eagle's Nest, and I think Eagle's Nest Wilderness, and you go up to like Summit County Vale, they have stuff called Eagle's Nest, like on the ski areas and stuff. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, it has other whether it's other parts of the state that use that name, or the Hitler's vacation home name, it does have other uses of the name. So it's not really unique. It's,
Well, and the more words you have in it, the less people are going to use it. They'll come up with their own
It's gotta be
thing.
one.
Purple makes sense. Pirate makes sense. You know, fire station is almost too much. That's why people call it red, right? You know, one-word names typically stick.
yeah.
And other than that, I just want to say fabulous job on it. My kids have been down it several times and love it, so great job on all the amenities.
So I think the overwhelming consensus seems to be to wait. So I guess we would reopen the naming contest, Patrick?
Mhm.
And what do we want to say? End of January? End of February? Because we still would want to choose a name for the grand opening at Arbor Day in April.
Do you want to have the name in place for the grand opening in April? And if that's the case, how long does it take to make the sign? How long does it take to get approved to the board? And you kind of back it up and say, this is where we have to.
I think
What we did with
that's
Autry
the
Park-
longer
Autry
process.
Park, we did a temporary sign for that day,
Yeah.
and we just made that coordinated.
The longer process is getting the board to approve it. It's going to probably take like
Right.
at least a month or something to get it probably on their agenda, right?
I think we could probably get it on the agenda fairly quickly. I think,
Assuming they pick it at the time
Right.
that it's on their agenda, then they don't kick it back another
Right.
meeting.
yep.
I'll do my best to
And
make
then
sure
there's
that doesn't
also,
happen.
you know, really that board meeting becomes the official, like, reveal, because it has to be done. It's a public
Yes.
discussion. So, let's say that's the board tackles that at the second meeting in February, or I'm sorry, the board's canceling the second meeting in March, so it would have to be the first meeting in March.
So I have another question. If we're sitting here debating about whether we want the name affiliated with the school, and we're going to send a recommendation, should we ask the board what their thoughts are on it?
But does that at all?
Well, I would think if we make the decision that we don't want to associate it with the school, part of our recommendation would not only be a list of 3 or 5 names, it would be a notation that we specifically excluded names related to the school, i.e. El Dorado, Eagle, Soaring, for this reason, and we can say, we can say that reason. I think that would be part of our recommendation to the board is the PROSTAC feels it should not be associated with the school.
Could you possibly, and maybe it's talking out both sides of your mouth, but say, PROSTAC feels we should not align this with the school, and here's the names that we recommend. However, if the board chooses to, here's the next set of, names that were popular that we recommend. But again, strongly say, we don't suggest these names, but give them options of some of the popular ones that came out of the survey.
And is there any risk of hurt feelings or squashing dreams if you basically say, I think obviously we're saying that most of the names from the school and the kids were probably not what we were looking for. I don't know that you would get those kids.
Well, it'd be very interesting to know that if it comes back out in February and we redo this and compare and just say, what percentage of the names are aligned with the school? How many of the folks who actually submitted stuff really aligned it with the school? And if it's very overwhelmingly, that might send a message.
But I would also say that there were names from kids that were not associated with the school. I mean, some of them are names on there that came from kids that were not associated with the school. So we could end up picking a name that was picked that was submitted by a kid or a class.
So maybe we just work collectively on the language of how we want to message that back out. Because I think it makes a lot of sense what people experience the park.
Well, and to an extent, it is the kids that are at that school that are utilizing it and going to be there every day. And I know, my son is already like, I just want to run over to the park after school, So it's one of those, they are the users, they are the ones that are going to know it the best. And, what is their feel? And I don't want to exclude them.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should at all. And I think that there was a lot of really good names from school related to just geography, related to just fun names that were just totally off the wall, that had no relationship. And it was just like, we should name it. There was a couple that were just some odd name, just because it was catchy.
And some of them, it could have a double entendre, if you will. I'm not suggesting nest, right? But if something like that, you're just saying it's a nest. Well, kids are saying eagle, they think associated with that. I'm not, something to that effect you could have that somebody could interpret it as related to the school, but it doesn't have any of the school name with it.
Any any feedback from historical or anything from them? Usually they got ideas.
I don't think it's been put to them yet.
I don't think it has either.
I mean,
They're familiar with the list, but nothing all that significant. We also asked the youth leadership kids had any real interest in being involved in the naming process, and I think a few of them submitted names, but they weren't overly tied to being a part of the process. So.
yeah. And I mean, I think I made the comment last time that the last two naming processes were heavily put on a historical significance. And since this property, to my knowledge, doesn't really have any historical significance in the town, as far as the person who owned it, or it was, it's close to the mine or anything like that, I think this is probably a better opportunity to come up with a more original name than a historical name.
Yeah, but the historical side of it does give you an out from association with the
It
school.
sure does.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason I'm thinking, that's where my thought process is. If there's a historical name that something we're missing, that was what we would depend on them for. So,
Looking at the list, the only historical name that's been brought up is Ormond Park, after Miss Ormond who ran the school.
There were a couple, but then there's just some of these things like the Miners Ridge, the, memorial, and
that's been tough because
we could name it Harambe.
Yeah, Harambe.
Yeah.
The board has
Kids know that.
said time and time again they're not interested in any of the coal mining themes. But, I don't know. Ormond Park had some traction at Founders.
But maybe, this was sort of a long, enduring process to get this park built.
Infinity Park?
Cadillac Park, because of
It took too long,
the
Park.
Cadillac version. Yeah.
Well,
That's fine.
I don't know, maybe, I'm not throwing out a name as a suggestion, but just sort of as a notion. Maybe it's like Transformation Park, or it's New Era Park.
Yeah.
Or, if you really want something that's unique, not associated with the school, something that makes it its own, I mean, you could go with that sort of a naming convention.
Well, we're going to open the naming contest back up, so Brian, you're welcome to enter,
Yeah.
and you could win a
Well, and I
$50
think-
gift card if your name gets chosen.
I think if we reopen it, that's what we really want to emphasize, is that we are looking for something that creates a unique identity
Yeah.
for this park and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with anything else in town. But it's a landmark park, and we really want people to think hard about what's unique about this park.
You just named it Landmark Park.
Landmark Park,
Yeah.
there you go. You know, but I think that's what we really have to play up, is that, you know, now that it's open, let's go for its unique identity.
Yeah.
So to answer your first question, you said, when do we bring it back to PROSTAC, right?
Well,
Or
so
when do we
yeah,
do
if the naming contest ended at the end of January, then we would discuss it in mid-February.
And then you have one meeting
But-
in March with the board.
But then,
Isn't that
yeah,
February?
but then if
Another second
it were
February?
end of February, we would pick in March and it wouldn't go to the board until April, and then there's a good chance you wouldn't have a name by Arbor Day.
You could do the second February meeting, collect feedback, do the first March meeting, and then we'd be ready to go by,
Okay.
April.
So the naming contest could be extended to the end of January, or the first week of January, or.
Well, I would think you could go.
I mean, we
First
just,
week of February.
you could even go probably the second week of February, as
Yeah.
long as it's before our meeting, right? It's before the PROSTAC meeting. So
So
that,
basically, we're allowing individuals to utilize the park for 2 months.
yeah.
And
And,
really give a sense of what they feel is.
and I would say that if you send out another notice to the public of we're reopening and
Extending.
extending the naming contest, the reason should be, we were fortunate enough to open the park with good weather still in November. Now that it's being used, we would like to extend the naming contest to generate more names based on actual usage of the park.
Actually getting to see what the park is like
Yeah,
versus.
so people can
guessing.
get a feel of the park and have a chance to submit names based on
And
that.
again, that it will create a unique identity for this park,
And the
not that
idea-
it's piggybacked on something else.
And the idea-
Did you guys say end of January?
Or as long as it's before our February meeting, so you could do it,
I mean, you could leave it
February
open until
10th
the
or
10th of
something
February,
like that.
probably.
Just
Yeah.
for the sake of notes, I'm gonna say end of January,
Okay,
if you guys are around.
but you can just look at the calendar. and-
Well, yeah, and,
Our February meeting's the 15th, so it's gonna have to be according to the
I
calendar.
would also maybe recommend just public comment with the board in case, the board may, for some reason, wanna name it now. So letting them know that this is the recommendation. They'll see it in the notes, but maybe just a quick heads up.
And I will not be at the next board meeting.
Well, I'll be at the next board meeting, and I'll have to, I'll report. And if you'll just help me remember to say that we're extending
Because,
it.
right,
Yeah.
they're expecting this to come up sooner. I don't think they're gonna have any issue with it.
Yeah, I
We'll
don't
just
think
figure out how to, that way it gets everybody's wheels turning. It's a good opportunity too, and then it'll be on camera to get people thinking about it as well.
Okay.
And I like the idea, to make sure we kind of stress today that it's being extended and not reopened, because you want the folks who've already submitted names to understand that their names are not being thrown out.
Yeah, they're still
That
under
they're
consideration.
still under consideration, and so.
Okay. So let's move on to item number 3, the 2017 work plan. So since you've all had plenty of hours
Ample
to
time.
Copious.
review it,
15 minutes.
I meant to have sent it out much earlier than I did.
That's because I reformatted it, because it was teeny.
I didn't reformat.
You can read mine. The only comment I had on it was number 5. I just wanted to make sure,
First quarter, number 5?
yeah, first quarter, number 5. Do we necessarily want to say potential community recreation center, or do we want to say indoor recreation space or something like that? I mean, I just want to make sure that's the language we want to use there. I'm comfortable with it.
Well, so just to be clear, this is more talking about a non-town center space there is another item on the work plan in the ongoing that mentions town center indoor civic space. I don't know if that addresses any part of your concern.
But I guess from looking at it, how does the board know that that's two separate issues?
Well, they're two separate line items.
I don't know, I guess.
I mean, I'm not committed to this wording. I just want to be clear that this line item number 5 for first quarter is talking more about the potential of
So you
a,
want to just add standalone?
yes,
Rec center?
standalone. I mean, really, to be blunt, this is talking about a rec center on the Richmond 15 that would need a ballot initiative.
Can you say that?
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
be that specific in there?
Well, I think.
I don't know if
I
we
think
wanna
the-
be
yeah,
that.
I think the board, based off the budget discussion and the $50,000 allocated for some kind of public engagement, what I understood is that is a completely acceptable end goal, if not the desired end goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what this is getting at, without being, I mean, with being a little bit more vague, but that's what it's getting at. So we can change it to be more direct.
And then I guess I have a question on the ongoing.
Mhm.
It says the continued assessment for aquatics facilities, including potential for an additional outdoor facility in town Superior Town Center?
So,
Is it
I
an
mean,
outdoor or
that's,
an indoor? Because I
Well,
thought all the
alright.
discussion's been about an enclosure on the north pool.
so that, this is
Clarify
more,
that.
this is more of a rollover. It doesn't seem likely that there will be an additional outdoor pool in town center. That said, without getting too into it, there is a potential option for a indoor facility adjacent to the sports stable. We don't want to really get into that right now,
Right,
but
right.
but this is just more of an ongoing. Again, that's why it's on the ongoing list. It's been a rollover for a couple of years now with the town center conversations of would there be a town pool in town center, and so this is just that's where it comes from. It's not a new item.
So I have another follow-up then. I'm gonna roll. I swear it was somewhere in there. Is there a review of the town master plan? Because there's a lot of pieces in play. And how's it all fit together? Because we have the South Pool, the North Pool, and now Town Center. And now we start talking about recreational opportunities at potentially Richmond 15, is that the name?
Mhm.
At the Colton Trailhead. So how does all those pieces tie together, and where's the central core of the community to say there's a recreation center with an indoor pool or an outdoor pool and you know, community space, et cetera? And I think that ties back into even, you know, the development of this building compared to across the street.
So
I
Number-
know it's touchy. but
number
it's-
4 of the fourth quarter. Again, it's a rollover item. It's on the fourth quarter for this year too. I think it was last year as well.
Every year.
It never gets done because it's basically been, well, one, it will be a big task, but two, it's basically been said it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, and we haven't wanted to allocate. I mean, it's the limited
But-
funds we get, we've wanted to put towards actual amenities and not a master plan update. But at some point, this is something we have to do.
But at
We
some
need to
point, you're gonna
update.
be past the time when you needed the master plan, because you're gonna have pieces all over the community, and you're not gonna have a
So-
cohesive understanding of the.
This is
Superior.
this is what I've been thinking about, but I don't know if it's a realistic. Could we have a working group that's really committed to doing this, that could possibly do it with little to no consultant involvement? I don't know if, would the town even be comfortable with just committee working on the master plan and not having a professional involved?
It would
be
unusual, but I think.
I mean,
Could ask the board.
I mean, I think that's one way to make sure it does happen is have a core group that's really committed to dedicating a significant amount of time to it,
Well,
and not have to put a lot of our little bit of funds
Right.
towards it.
And to an extent, I mean, it'd be a discussionary topic to say a breakdown of the space being developed or opportunities versus what we already have in place.
Yeah.
Because that's really the baseline to build the master plan.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the 2005 master plan has been accomplished. So
Right.
it needs to be updated just from the standpoint of
done.
removing what's
Right.
done. But then a lot of it is, especially with town center now in some form of forward movement, there's probably things that we're thinking about now that were not included 11 years ago
Right.
in that master plan. Having the Richmond 15, which they didn't have then, things like that. There are things that could be added to the master plan that weren't on the radar back then.
I just think it's an update that would help guide not only this committee with, is it really good to have a trail there, community space there, whatever, but for the board as well. And I know it's a costly thing, but I think if we could at least start the baseline and just understand what the pieces are and what's totally outdated and what, is new opportunities.
So what I'm hearing is you're going to head the working group. To
In
tackle
the
this.
time I'm in
All right.
town.
So,
Honestly, to me, it's important
Sounds
though.
like great hotel room work, man.
What we can do is,
I'll start it on my trip next week.
we usually in the first quarter, and I might have even removed it because we didn't even really do it this year, is look at working groups for the year.
It's on there.
Is it on there?
Yep.
So this
gotta be done.
can be one of them. We can talk about this in January as properly forming a working group to better look at this and
Bring it with me.
come up with a request of the board that we would like to move forward with this and see what level of comfort they have with us doing it versus hiring a consultant to do it. And maybe we still have a consultant advise us on it, but it doesn't cost as much as it would if they did it entirely themselves.
Yeah, we got a screenplay for the pricing. It'd be just shy of 80,000.
To do it, for them to do it.
Yeah, because it involves a whole new survey and,
Oh,
I mean,
they would base it on a survey, okay.
well, that's a piece of it. If you look at that 05 one, it's got needs and.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a beefy, it's.
I'll have to take another look at the 2005 master plan to get my head around whether or not it's something we could accomplish.
Well,
But
yeah.
we can talk about this in January again. And it's currently on the work plan for the year, so. Any other questions?
Second quarter, number 6. The Coyote Ridge Trail maintenance, shouldn't that be before we hit April, May, so we can plan it when the weather turns?
Yes. The reason why it really ended up second quarter is because first quarter was already so heavy, but yes, I
That's the one
mean,
that pops out of me is,
the-
if we wait till.
Actually, it's for the same reason, third quarter, number 2.
Yeah, exactly. I
Same
think
thing.
that should be moved up to the second
Yeah.
quarter. and
okay.
So
Coyote
Ron,
Ridge.
going back, we're moving Coyote Ridge to first quarter?
That's fine. I mean, I kind of thought that we probably would talk about it in the first quarter anyway, but just so it doesn't look like we're doing like 90% of our work plan in the first quarter, I had put it in the second.
Well,
It was going to be
and
like, we were going to talk about it in April, because
the months are coming up, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's, even though it's number 6, I figured that would be like the first
I mean,
thing we tackled in the second quarter.
Do we really talk about the budget recommendations in the first quarter? It usually gets pushed off every
We
year, doesn't it?
start talking
We do
about it
trails.
in June, and that's
What's that?
the
Trails, I know if we're doing trails in the budget discussion, we've kind of talked about it early as part of that 5-year
yeah.
trails.
I mean,
plan.
June is still part of the
Well, I was just
second
looking for
quarter.
stuff you could swap.
So,
If you're
But
looking
it's
for
under the
things.
first quarter. December 9 of the first quarter, right?
Right,
oh, is it? Okay.
That used to tie to
trails.
number 6.
Yeah, trails.
That's why.
Right, yeah.
And
So
then,
you could combine 6 and 9, and it wouldn't.
yeah,
it
and it
wouldn't look so
also,
crowded.
kind of
Oh.
it also used to tie somewhat to the amenities prioritization.
True, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, the budget recommendation, the beginning of the budget, that's,
Just
like he's
ongoing.
saying, it's kind of tied into the other things, so it's not really an item in and of itself. It naturally occurs because we're talking about the other items.
Sure.
We're talking about the budget.
I don't see first quarter being top heavy as an issue though, because we usually don't do much in the fourth quarter anyway, so.
Yeah, especially since we generally don't have a December meeting. The fourth quarter is
Sure we
usually
do.
only 2
No
weeks.
dinner.
That's right.
Well, a
Both
productive,
seats.
a productive
That's where
December
the work
meeting.
plan gets discussed, is at Old Chicago.
Yeah.
It's very
Corbin,
productive.
before we move off, you had thrown something out about one of the items in the third
3-2.
quarter?
Number two.
Yeah, the bike park.
And that kind of ties
maintenance.
along with the Coyote Ridge thing as well.
So
It's just, you know, maintenance of these things.
So move that into second?
And
You can tie those together, say Coyote Ridge.
to
and
be
Bike.
perfectly honest, that is kind of an ongoing staff item. And so they're, even if we don't address it, they're probably going to address it.
Which one?
Third quarter, number 2,
Oh,
moving it up.
We will be rolling out the
Should I say?
the trail maintenance, trail monitor, trail ranger, whatever we're gonna end up calling it, program. So that'll be kind of a volunteer program, not only for maintenance, but for people also to ride and do education on the trails about safety and, you know, so it all ties together. I think you're right, Peter.
okay.
By the way, just as a, before I forget, you know, Velostop, Sonny, who works there?
Yeah.
He's buying it. Apparently, he
Today.
becomes the owner, it's supposed to be finalized next week,
Yeah,
so.
we
buying
discussed,
which?
we discussed
Velostop.
the possibility of him doing some instruction for us on the pump track. Great guy.
He's a real nice guy.
I
So
also
the
learned too that
managers
somebody
buying
drove
it?
through the front of that
They did.
storefront last week.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
I
was just
saw
there
that
last
on
night.
Facebook or something. I went, what? I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
What was that? Someone
Somebody
drove
drove
a
through
car?
Velostop.
Accidentally, it wasn't on purpose. They didn't steal anything. He said it was an accident.
Yeah. I think
But didn't that,
trashed.
but didn't that happen to like the
Subway,
subway?
yeah.
They went.
That went
one,
through.
She was texting, she went through the subway.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, this is my opinion, I won't be on PROSTAC, I'll just be watching, but I think you're being a little aggressive by saying you're gonna make a recommendation on the community recreation center in the first quarter. I just think you need to be more thoughtful about that.
No, we're going to start the review.
No, it says, conduct a review and provide a recommendation to the board on a potential community recreation center. You're saying you're gonna do that by March 30th?
No. I mean, we're going to start it. It's probably.
I think
that-
we need to change some language then before this goes
What?
to the board. Because
Uh-huh.
I, for one, as a board member, am going to say, really and truly, you think you're going to give us a solid recommendation in 90 days?
I mean, because again, I would look at, we can change the language, but I would look at any of these items as somewhat fluid on the timeline. I mean, we're placing them as some guideline as to when they should occur in the year, but it's not like an item in the first quarter can't be dealt with in the second quarter and vice versa.
Well, we have the.
But I think
we have
what
the-
Sandy's saying is we need to put in there by the end of the year, a recommendation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what I'm
Well-
saying is you would initiate the review, and then if you wanted to, say you will provide a recommendation to the board in the
By-
third quarter or the second quarter,
Well-
because you do want to have a fairly
And
firm
we
deadline.
could say a future, but to, again, be blunt on this one, if there seemed to have been some traction with the previous board, that this could potentially be a ballot initiative next fall. And so,
Yeah,
if
so
that's the case, the wheels really do need to be in motion by like April to decide whether or not it is gonna be a ballot initiative.
I guess I understand Sandy's point is that, you know, to change a little bit, say, initiate review with expected, initiate review of the 2015 indoor, and then expected completion third quarter.
No,
Can you-
I
can
see
you
what
just-
you're,
Well,
I remember what you're
so we
saying,
would
though,
have
'cause
to
we
have-
discussed this and we did the backtrack.
Yeah,
If
which
we
is
wanted to
why
get
it
this
ended
on-
up up
And we
front.
said it can't be on 16 because there's too much stuff on 16.
Right.
It'll get lost, it'll get voted down. So
Yeah.
our goal was, at that time, I don't know if you guys are even on it yet, right, Sandy, where we said, let's get this on the 17 ballot.
Well, and even more recent than that.
Well, I
the-
think it
the
was 18,
board-
but
I
don't have the
The
numbers.
board, at least in
Yeah, we just weren't gonna
the
put it on
board
presidential.
retreats, there were a couple board members that seemed open to it being on the 2017 ballot, because it would somewhat stand alone. I mean, there could be other things such as the home rule stuff
If it's
on the
17,
ballot, but.
If it's 17, this committee would have to make a recommendation in January or February to take the $50,000 that's budgeted, because we would need to come up with all the design options, all the public engagement meetings, we would need to hire the attorney or whomever to work on the language, to have that done by July or August, so it could then start to.
And answering your questions, our recommendation could be, we don't have enough material to go forward. with
Exactly.
2017.
But-
So I see what you're doing, Peter, and I kind of like it.
But what if, instead of provide, what if we said, and work toward a recommendation to the
No,
board?
I think if you leave it as is, add the word, some kind of the standalone thing, so that they understand we're not talking about town center. And then if they push us on, and if we can't get it done, then, as you say, we just push it off, and if it turns out it's not gonna happen for 17.
Well, we already have multiple plans with budgets by BRS.
Well, but we would need to be more specific.
Yeah,
than
but I mean,
those.
there's
I mean,
already,
We would have to.
some wheels are already turning
Right,
there,
right.
and some baselines
Yeah,
are
we have some
established.
initial stuff, but I mean, we would have to actually come up with, pretty much come up with, this is gonna be the design, this is gonna be the budget. It would have to be well,
The,
more conceived
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at the
than.
last
More
board
refined.
retreat,
Well, you
they
gotta
were
have some
very
community engagement on this. If you're
Well,
gonna,
that's
if you're
all-
gonna do a recreation center, how are you gonna do community engagement in January?
Well, it's gonna happen between January and April, say. It's gonna.
Nothing would happen if we don't do something to the board and they say, go ahead and do it. If they turn around and say, don't waste your time, then we don't waste our time. That's the whole point of putting it in the first, right? Am I reading it
First
right?
quarter,
Peter?
yeah.
Well, right, I mean, but part of our review might be, or probably will be, public engagement before to be able to develop a recommendation. Because we could do public engagement and start hearing a lot of, this is not supported by the public. And so, despite, part of the review is gonna be looking back to the survey that's already been done.
Right.
But part of the review probably will be some new public engagement. And that's all gonna be to reach a decision of whether we wanna make a recommendation to the board to move forward or not. If the board decides to move forward, then that is definitely gonna include more public engagement, because we're gonna have to get a lot more detailed to work towards, a ballot initiative.
So what I'm wondering, is this actually two different tasks? Is the first task to conduct a review of the indoor survey? And then the second part of that is, after you've conducted it, is to later in second or third quarter, wherever it makes sense, provide the recommendation based on that?
I mean, it could be two items. I think it works to the same objective, but whether it's one item or two items, but it could be, basically a review and then finalize a recommendation. I mean, you could have it as.
What do you envision that review, I mean, the survey will tell you, we know the survey will tell you that based off that information to move forward with some kind of recommendation for indoor space. So
I
don't
think
know.
the review is basically for us to just formalize a recommendation that basically reiterates that, yes,
Okay.
the survey, but be specific. The survey says that, this and this amenity are top priority, use the statistical information to support it. But that's the problem. No, we didn't really do that. I mean, yes, a summary was put together of the indoor survey, but PROSTAC never looked at it.
Okay.
Plus, you'll have 4 new members, hopefully.
Yeah, the
and I
last,
think-
the last board retreat, the board specifically said.
But members
the
on this
sitting
committee,
board
too. But you'll have members on this committee too, new
Yeah.
members on here
Right.
as part of that.
Well, they specifically said they wanted us to go back and look at the survey. Now, I think the other thing we have to keep in mind, though, is we are in a completely different environment right now than we were 2 years ago, because the sports stable's sitting across the street. We've had requests to put a bubble over the pool, so we just have to keep all those things in mind that, that are different. And there's been a different sense, heightened awareness about indoor space and what it can mean and things like that. So,
Which is,
you know, that's what they wanted us to do, was to
Yeah.
go back and look at the survey and give them some feedback on what we came up with from the survey. I don't know, they necessarily said, give us a recommendation on a rec center. So that's my only, I'd have to go back and read listen to the tape again.
and
so.
but whether or not they did say that specifically, I think by us putting it in our work plan, PROSTAC's trying to push that as an agenda item.
I agree with that.
And so the board could look at our work plan and say, no, we don't want you to push that as an agenda item, change the language or remove it altogether. But that's kind of the point here. I mean, we're putting together a work plan of what we're saying we want to work on, but the board, even though they generally don't really take items off, they could. I can't think of a time when the board has really questioned a work plan of a committee, but they review
Yeah,
it
they
for a
have.
reason.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
2 years ago, they cut a lot out of everybody's.
Really?
Yeah, and
Yeah, but I mean,
I
honestly,
do
they-
remember there being a big discussion about RCACs one year.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, I
um,
know that they've tried.
So, I mean,
yeah.
if you guys are comfortable with it, then I just felt like maybe you should.
I mean, I guess that's a
This makes
question-
it sound like you're gonna get everything done in the first quarter, and I just don't know whether the board
Well,
will be
it's- and
prepared.
maybe
to deal with it.
Backtracking to see, like you're saying, is the board expecting in 2017 something to be on a ballot?
Well,
If
and
that's
I-
the case,
I think
work
that,
on it in
We
December.
may have missed it already.
We
yeah.
may have missed it.
yeah. Well, it will be one of the first things we look at in January. I mean, it basically will be our January meeting,
Yeah.
is looking at the indoor space survey. And whether or not that's enough to make a recommendation, it could be. Or we could decide to, hold a public engagement meeting as well to maybe get a little bit updated information, because again, the survey would be 2 years old at that point. But it'll be basically the main item we're gonna deal with in January. Aside from some of the procedural stuff that we have to deal with in
You
January.
could
we
also
submit
just
this?
make a recommendation to the board as to what you guys want or expect out of the $50,000. Because that number was put in there with just the broad heading of PROSTAC will conduct something
Well,
towards.
exactly.
something.
Our
indoor
recommendation
space.
would basically be, we recommend that you use this $50,000
Right.
to further, public engagement towards a ballot initiative for indoor
Yeah.
space. I mean, that's where I personally
Yeah,
see this
I think
going.
almost just exactly what yeah.
But
That was,
we just need to have a meeting to talk about it.
yeah.
Talk about the survey, talk about, if you didn't, Patrick, can you send us the summary of the survey?
Oh, yeah.
As, I don't know if you want to send the whole survey as well, but at least the summary. I don't know that I actually have that.
Remember, it was a board, it was like
It's out on the.
I have it.
I think it's.
Or, that's right, you had it
I'm
on
pretty sure
your
it's out on
campaign site, right?
some of my campaigns.
So
Yeah.
if you could,
It was on
if
the
you could
town
send
But it
us.
was, but I lifted it off the town website, so.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm just
I didn't-
saying, I think
Yeah.
that's how
I didn't
little,
have a-
that's
I didn't
how
have the
little
secret copy.
attention it got.
Yeah,
Is I was on
absolutely.
that indoor space working group, and I was part of talks, afterwards with, what was his name, Bill, or the guy
cares?
that did the statistics?
No, the other guy.
The statistical guy. What was?
Jeff?
The guy.
To be on PROSTAC?
No,
No, the guy who
conducted
ended
the
up
survey.
jumping ship and going to,
Chris Cares, not Chris Strapinski, Chris
Chris
Cares.
Cares.
Yeah.
Um,
Chris Cares
I
did the
was-
survey, and Chris Strapinski did the public.
I was
engagement.
part of all those meetings afterwards, and I don't remember seeing the summary. I remember seeing how we tried to manipulate the data, how everyone came in the room with their own agenda and tried to manipulate the data. but I don't think I saw that survey summary. So that's how
Yeah.
little attention I think it got, at least within ProStack, was it never got presented to us. So if we could at least see that before January to all have a chance to review it, I think that would be a big step in accomplishing this first quarter agenda item.
When we submit this to, when we submit this to the board, is it just like throw it over the fence and say, hey, this is the stuff we want to do, and they evaluate it, or is there any conversation, do they ask questions on it?
They can.
You guys will also have the benefit, you're first up with the board for your dinner with the board in January. I've seen it done where all committees present it all at once, and the board goes through each work plan and asks questions. Normally the chair and the liaison or the members show up, and the board just fires a question and you answer, and it goes back and forth. I've seen committees, if we were to get it done early, we could submit it in December, and then it's a standalone item.
And I would like them, that's why I would like us to move this through tonight, is that hopefully they can approve it in December.
Yeah, because you'll have, we'll have art committee, OSAC, RCAC, Historic Commission, and Youth Leadership all need work plans approved.
Sounds like fun.
All out of Parks and Rec, man.
Any
You were
other?
the hub.
Any other questions, concerns, any items that anyone can think of that has not been added to the work plan? That even if you have a pet project you would like us put on our radar, now's the time.
I have a question. There's the pickleball court by the North Pool is in the budget.
Yeah.
Is that a done deal, or how does that fit in this work plan?
That is something that will pop up on our amenities priority list, which is in the first quarter of the work plan. Generally, like, a specific amenity item, that's where it pops up, is the amenity priorities. There's another one that came up on the Facebook group over the last weekend about dog park lights. It's something we've talked about before. We're not going to add it as a work plan item, but we could certainly bring that up as part of the amenities priority list discussion. Specific amenities such as the pickleball court would be discussed there. And pickleball's on that list. It has been for a few years. It got into the budget, as you just mentioned. So, but that's not, Patrick, it's in the budget, but that was for a standalone pickleball court, right?
Yeah, the board put it in there as the placeholder and then asked ProStack to evaluate the need for a standalone pickleball court.
So do we need to add that to our work plan?
I think we told them at the time it'd be addressed in the amenities prioritization process, but
But because that's the issue I saw with them putting in the budget is, where is it gonna go?
right.
Why put it in the budget if we don't have a location picked out yet? But
Two courts.
It'd be a bad,
Two courts by the North Pool. I don't know, I read that wrong, this is looking at it earlier.
I don't know.
But anyway, yeah.
So the question I have on whether we put it as part of the amenities or a separate line item, if we think that it's going to be because that's on the budget, if we think that's going to be a longer, drawn-out conversation, then we could fit with the rest of the amenities, then it would make sense to have it as a standalone. But if we don't think that that's going to be a long, drawn-out, that we could fit it in the conversation with amenities, then it makes sense to put it in there.
That's the only reason why I would think it would be a standalone item, is because if we're gonna have a longer conversation about specific location of the amenity, then maybe that should be a work plan
Doesn't-
item.
It doesn't fit in the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's more of a discussion.
It's
It's
exactly right.
yeah, because it's more of a
Right.
planning. It's like
Yeah.
if you were gonna do a park, you wouldn't have like, School Parcel Park wouldn't have been a item just on the amenities priority list. It was a
elsewhere.
work plan item for years, to get there. So I would say
Where's it like?
The
third quarter, maybe, yeah. Add an item that says discussion.
It's a placeholder in the 17 budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing, is if we're putting in the third
think
quarter,
it's
it's a
all the
little
first
late,
quarter.
but again, if we end up having time, we can move stuff up. It doesn't,
Right.
this is still a fluid work plan. It's not, we can't, our feet are not over the fire to
It's a guideline.
stick
Just
to
more of a
the,
guideline.
to this, each quarter. I mean, we can move stuff around.
It made its way in there, Ron, after we didn't get it in the new park. So I think the board, after some public dialogue, felt that it's at least worth exploring if we need it.
Did they put enough in it just to explore it or to build it?
No, there's 175,000 as a
Wow.
placeholder in the budget, which, you know, it would build it.
Build it.
Children's
Build it.
Park.
The question is where?
Children's
One of the
Park.
ideas that we had looked at early on was that kind of seating corridor right outside of the tennis courts at the North Pool. Now, I don't think the tennis folks would like that very much, since it's where they all congregate after. We had talked about potentially up there by the South Pool, next to the pavilion and the flat grass space up there. There's been some discussion about, potentially trying to, do something over at Town Center. I know that the Impact Sports guys striped their court with pickleball, and it's getting used. They opened it up to everybody.
Well, there's also the discussion of, do you move the disc golf course?
Yeah.
And then you could potentially put something over there. It wouldn't really fit with the more natural landscape of of Autry Park, but I mean, if you did move the disc golf course, you're opening up a pretty large piece of land.
That comes up a lot.
So,
So you don't need to mow the whole thing, you won't lose your bike.
disc golf versus rattlesnake.
No, mountain bike, this single track versus disc golf where you lose your frisbee. So you don't have to.
We get a lot of
golf track.
requests for single track over there.
Is there a certain number of residents that have to come to the board or to PROSTAC with an idea before it, gets on the list? How does it?
Depends on the idea.
A lot
I mean-
of times it's the community involvement.
Yeah, I
Chili
mean,
Fest or 4th of July or things
you-
like that where.
Usually, when stuff gets added to the amenities priority list, it's because we've heard it over and over again. So whether it's through, like the more casual discussions at the events, or it's been brought up more formally, like to the board, or in a PROSTAC meeting or whatever. But to be perfectly honest, there's been plenty of things that have moved forward because of essentially one resident going to the board and making enough of a plea for it that it gets pushed forward. It really depends.
An example that comes to mind.
To be perfectly honest, this pickleball really got their attention because of the stink of one resident. I mean, it's been on the amenities priority list for a while, but the way it got in the budget was really the voice of one.
Yeah. Pump track was a pretty small group of people. Slacklining
By the
was a
dog
pretty
park.
small group of people.
Yeah.
Maybe just a handful.
Whether or not it actually moves forward, but any discussion of off-leash dogs, like in Coyote Ridge area or anywhere in town, that's actually they've been pretty vocal at times, but it's a relatively small group of people. It's not an overwhelming majority of the town has brought that up to date. I mean, right now there's a pin in it. It hasn't moved forward, but it's certainly been close to moving forward, and it's a vocal minority that gets behind ideas like that, and they do get traction.
regardless of cost?
I mean, cost is all part of it. I mean, the board is, that, we are less concerned with cost than the board. I mean, because the board is the one that actually has to approve the construction, the move forward. So PROSTAC is generally asked to not consider cost. I mean, sometimes the board will kind of contradict themselves and ask us to go back and look at things because of cost. But generally, we're asked not to consider cost. We're asked to consider whether or not something's in the best interest of the community, if it's going to serve the residents well.
I mean, we're asked not to consider cost and not to consider, for the lack of a better word, backlash, like earlier tonight, that small trail, very first time we even came on our radar, somebody was out here saying, no, we don't like it. And, the direction we got was, let the board handle that piece, do the community outreach part, understand their concerns, but really just assess it whether you think it's worthwhile, it's needed, and let the board look at the higher level decision of the community, how much they don't like it or do like it, and cost and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be unbiased in that opinion.
But, we look more at the best interest of the community.
Yeah.
And so there might be a handful of people who are vehemently opposed to an idea, but if we feel as on a whole as a committee that it serves the greater good of, there could be, for that trail, for example, has directly around it has several hundred homes, not just a couple that are adjacent to it. I mean, not that we're making this decision right now, but I'm saying that's a factor that we're going to have to consider in that decision is what's in the best interest of the overall neighborhood, community, town.
So just one last thing, looking at a rec center, to be blunt. Given the passage of the Louisville ballot measure, how are you going to weigh that? In making a decision.
Well, I mean, that's the challenge that be perfectly honest, the town has not overcome to date. They seem, every time this idea of a rec center in Superior moves forward, it always seems to get pulled back by this argument of, well, there's the Louisville Rec Center, there is Lakeshore, there's the YMCA and Lafayette Rec Center, and now the sports table. I mean, that's something that will be part of the conversation. But at the same time, you look at every neighboring community, and they have their own rec center. They've decided that it's in the best interest of their community to have their own rec center and not rely on the private or public amenities available in the neighboring towns. So that's the argument that you would hear against it, is that, well, Superior deserves its own, regardless of what Louisville has, regardless of what Broomfield and Lafayette and Arvada have, and Boulder has. So, I mean, we're going to have to, in the discussion, we're going to have to weigh those two arguments against each other.
And that's part of understanding that survey too, because there was a lot of, I mean, it's 2 years, 3 years old now, but that survey had a lot of input on how many households and how many people wanted indoor recreation space and things like that in Superior.
And one of the questions was, well, some of the questions were, what do you use now? And they could put, they use Louisville, they use Lakeshore, they use YMCA. And then it's, would you use the Superior one if it was built? And we'll go back and look at that. But the majority was, yes, they would use. So regardless of whether they're currently using one of the neighboring facilities, the survey results said that they would use the Superior one. So again, one of the factors that we'll have to weigh in moving forward any recommendations.
I'll tell you a big factor in that is accessibility, right?
Mhm.
You know, Lakeshore is kind of accessible, but it's cost prohibitive for a lot of folks. The Louisville Rec Center, you know, for most kids, you have to drive them over there because they're not going to be able to take their bikes all the way up to the Louisville Rec Center on their own. You know, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, maybe older kids might, but if it was something local that they could just go over to, you know.
I agree with you.
And-
And also, I mean, I guess one of the other things you have to factor in is, we have a call-and ride system now that will get you over to Louisville. One tiny factor, I don't even know how.
Will it take you to the Louisville Rec Center? Is that in the zone? I know it'll take you to Monarch, but,
Yeah.
okay.
And then the concept of activity-based charging has come up. And I'm just kind of curious how that might play into, you know, a resident's decision to pay for a rec center or, you know, and Louisville's rates are gonna have to be going up.
Well, and that's the other thing. So Louisville is cheaper than Lakeshore, but the non-resident rate is still higher than the resident rate. So you would assume any facility built in Superior would have a resident rate lower than the Louisville non-resident rate. So when you're talking about cost, the Superior rec center would probably be the cheapest option. And so again, you're trying to provide an amenity that's closest to our residents as well as probably cheapest to our residents. Those are the arguments, you know, for doing it. I mean, that's why pretty much any town would build it, because it's going to be a option for their residents. It's going to be
Louisville Rec Center isn't self-funding, so.
well, none of them are.
Yeah.
They're all subsidized, yeah, to some extent. Some probably fund themselves better than others, but yes, you're essentially, it's a subsidized amenity.
But since you're talking about a ballot issue, I don't know how you're gonna weigh those cost considerations in, because they're kind of, you know, there's a lot of unknowns. How much is a non-resident gonna have to pay at Louisville, you know?
I mean,
We have to.
You just have to go with whatever their current is, unless they've said what their future rates are gonna be. We're just gonna have to take whatever their current rates are and,
Part of your consultant's job to do the thorough
yeah.
analysis.
And part of the reason that piece of land's been sitting there for 20 years, because no one wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Superior's not been in favor of paying for it. So that's the biggest problem. Because it's there, it's sitting there. And it should have been built in 98, 97. No interest, no one wanted to pay for it.
Well, and actually, if you look way back to when when it actually was voted on,
203, I think.
like
93.
93 or something. Like, I'm talking about like way at the
Way
beginning.
back then.
I mean, it lost by a couple votes. I mean, it's same with like how the open space, like tax. I mean, the I mean, you're talking back then you had like, you know, 1,000 people voting. So like the votes were like 590 to 610. I mean, like they were so narrow, some of those early ballot initiatives. And so there was some type of rec center voted on
Yeah, I thought
way
there was
on,
03. I thought there
way
was
early
03 or
on.
04, it was just unanimously crushed. And the reason it was crushed is because it was not properly,
Yeah,
there was no real good push to get it to be approved, and nobody wanted to see their property or taxes go up to fund it.
And I don't think it was well defined.
Yeah,
Right, it was a horrible.
I think you're
yeah.
talking 07.
Yeah, and
It
that's the
was-
confusion. That was a
It built to-
survey.
It was built to fail.
That was a survey, not a ballot initiative. So some people think, oh, we voted this down. No, that was a survey that had an overwhelming no, but that's because it was very poorly done.
Right.
And it had all this detail of this is like option A and option B and option C. It was not structured well. And if-
Basically, you just need to figure out a way to get $40 million, build it right, everybody's happy. But what's that gonna do to your tax costs? When you have Louisville right down the street and Lakeshore right down the street. Again, it's a weighing activity. If you can sell.
Put in municipal broadband.
Talk about subsidized amenity, right?
Yeah.
So do we need to,
Yeah, so any other changes to the work plan? Okay, so this one, I think we should make assuming, Sandy, you're going to vote on it, I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve
Last vote, your last vote.
the 2017 work plan as amended this evening.
And then what I'll do is I'll tighten up the language and just send it back out based off the notes I've written down.
Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor? All right. Passes unanimously.
Is it, Sandy? Your last official PROSTAC recommendation.
And you didn't get thrown off. And you weren't thrown off the committee, you were just.
So, so just before updates and look ahead, I mean, we're only going to have one meeting before we have the leadership election in January. And so I don't know that we really need to vote in a vice chair in Sandy's absence for next month. But, I mean, I would say, start thinking if anyone's interested in being chair or vice chair next year.
Do we have any people in the queue to come on PROSTAC?
handle the work.
3?
You do have
Okay.
3. Well, I know,
next month?
One's interviewed.
okay.
One has been interviewed. Yeah.
Well, and one of them was here tonight, and she realized that she can't serve on PROSTAC because it's going to conflict with another organization that she's on.
Who was that?
Kitty Sargent.
Okay, that's not someone I've talked to.
Yeah.
No.
She lives in the Summit.
Okay.
She actually would have been a great addition, but she can't do it.
Yeah.
She'll probably go for OSAC instead.
Staff normally, we don't get brought into the loop too much. It kind of is just between the applicant and the board, but I do think that there's 3 out there.
Well, and that was
Scheduled
Well, and
for,
part of the discussion at the board meeting
Yeah.
on Monday
So
night
that'll
is
change.
to have, and I hope that does go forward, whether or not the committees are actually weighing in on individual people, I'm hoping that
Well,
they at least
Yeah.
notify the committees and notify the department in charge of the committees
Yeah, and
of
that's
who
what
the
I
applicants
asked that
are.
happen, and I think
Because-
we're going to do it in January. but-
Because right now, it's like, we don't, generally Patrick doesn't know who the PROSTAC applicants are. I don't know, as chair, don't know who they are until they're interviewed by the board.
Yeah.
And so I have to, pay attention, watch the board meeting or go to the board meeting to even know who these applicants are before they're potentially appointed to the committee.
I think
Not that
that's-
I'm going to, should weigh an opinion, but it would be nice if we're at least notified.
Well, and what I asked at the trustees meeting, which was that the chair at minimum be notified and have the opportunity to at least weigh in if there were particular attributes that that person could bring to the committee if they had expertise in an area that, maybe the committee was looking for. So we're going to discuss it, I think, at the January retreat. But
I'm pretty certain those changes will happen.
and it seemed to be generally supported by the board that would indeed happen. So at least you guys have some awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of that going back was maybe a little bit of a knee-jerk, too far going.
Yeah.
It's got to be between the board and the applicant. Staff can't know because you don't want staff weighing in. The committee members can't know because you don't want a committee to know and then
You didn't want
talk to
clicks
trustees and
and-
say, we don't want that person in,
Yeah.
or yes, absolutely put that person in.
But to be perfectly honest,
But yeah.
trustees ask the opinion of the
Right.
committee or the committee chair anyway, and a lot of times when I've been asked, I don't know what to say because
You don't know
I have
anything about
not,
them.
I don't know
Right.
anything
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah, so I
So-
think this will help go a
Yeah.
long way.
So right now, you said that the one is interviewed and 2 more are
Have
potential?
applications.
I want to say that we have
applications in?
interviews scheduled, maybe the work session, I don't think it's the work session of the 28th, but probably the first meeting in December
Yeah.
on the 12th.
So
Well, it's
we'll see if they're appointed by the time we have the leadership elections, but generally the newbies
The
are
newbies wouldn't do it
not
anyway.
interested
Yeah.
in being, chair, vice chair. They're
Right.
definitely not chair, but,
I remember my first meeting, I just wanted to understand what was going on.
yeah. I mean, you should have been
Slow
here
down.
when,
That's changed? How's
when,
that changed?
You've been here
you
when
should have been
Peter
here
was.
when
Yeah.
Sandy and I
Oh, for
came
me, I'm like,
on,
I don't know.
with Brent, and we came on right in the middle of like a whole battle between committees,
PROSTAC
and I
and
mean,
PROSTAC.
it was like really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then we, in that same year, we started new park public engagement process, town center civic space public engagement process. And we had something else in there.
Founders was wrapping
And
up.
Founders was wrapping up.
Autry had just wrapped up
And the
pretty
committees-
much.
The committees were completely opposed to each other and were making like contradictory recommendations to slow stuff. I mean, it
Well,
was-
no, they were trying to like change they were trying to remove open space from PROSTAC.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, all right, anyway.
So,
Along those lines, by the way, I did support the open house that we had.
Oh, you were
Yeah,
here.
he
I was here
Okay.
for that.
I forgot to follow up with that.
That's fine. And I had a lot of good conversation with folks, and most of them were interested in PROSTAC. So
Okay, so there were people that
they were a
actually
lot
showed
of,
up?
yeah, I probably talked to about 10 folks. I even stayed an extra half hour talking to folks.
I think you're lying. I've been to plenty
He's
and no one
legit.
shows up.
We had
no,
literally.
this one was busy.
Okay, well, that's
I
good.
actually knew a couple of the folks who came
Yeah.
in, and so
That's good to know.
I followed up with him and said, let's, why don't you
Yeah.
apply? So
Well,
Yeah.
and did Jacques submit his application that was at the last meeting?
Yes, and that's the one who should be interviewed up. It's
In
been a
November?
scheduling.
Okay.
It's not always easy, I think, for Martin to try to get those guys to commit to the schedule, but Jacques,
Okay.
and then I'm
Yeah.
blanking on the other gal's name.
Yeah.
Is that the same one that we talked to at like
Maria,
Chili Fest or?
Oh, maybe. She
Yeah,
was
she's-
with kids.
she's
on-
got,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Talked to her multiple times, like for little events.
Okay, so updates and look ahead.
all right, brought forward the FDP specific to the Coal Creek corridor last night at Planning Commission. It was a short meeting, it was approved. We'll be bringing the FDP for Coal Creek corridor, just the creek, to the board on the 12th. This isn't parts 1 and 2. We've kind of stripped things out so we can get started with the Army Corps of Engineer permitting process. So, went really well, nothing's changed in the plan. Just the creek is now its own standalone document. Purple Park Pavilion update. I was hoping that we'd start the concrete this week. We didn't, with the other park going on, we just haven't been able to get to it and get comfortable with it. We've met with the contractor. It's gonna get done this year. I was hoping it would start this
We're
week.
just waiting for the snow to hit.
Well, yeah,
harder.
it's
Yeah.
turn of weather, right?
Exactly.
It's like,
For the temperature to drop.
I think it's gonna be exciting, the pavilions, I mean, we've already paid for it, it's on order. We'll be able to pour the concrete and then mount the pavilion afterwards, which will be great.
We can take
Count-
it off the amenity list, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna name that one Ron's Pavilion. That's what that one is. Count the lights. As you guys know, in pros, we've been kind of running this event for a couple of years. We're actually expanding it quite a bit this year, but it's going to be December 3rd, and we're going to try to stretch it between Asti Park and Grasso Park, and we're coordinating a little hayride between point A and point B, and we're thinking that the big fella may be able to ride into town on the fire truck, and kids might be able to get their picture with Santa on the fire truck, which would be pretty exciting.
Wow.
Katie and the crew's been working on a town Christmas tree, and they found ornaments that families or individuals can decorate, and then we'll secure them to the tree in Asti Park, and kind of keep this a fun, little kid-centric activity. So we're pretty excited about that.
is there gonna be a skate with Santa this year?
That one's always on
The chamber?
The chamber, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
So, Trail F update, bids for Trail F came in Monday. We had a pretty big spread, everything from 68,000, which was the low bid, which is where we thought it would be, all the way up to like 120 something. So we felt fairly confident making a recommendation to the board to go with low bid. It's a company called H2 Enterprises. They're a massive, massive reclamation company that I think is interested in getting going with jurisdictions, which is great. Which is probably why their bid was so low, is because they can afford it. Because looking at their project list, they're doing oil and gas pipeline. They're one of the largest reclamation and seeding companies in the United States. They're out of Keensburg. So we'll be bringing that contract forward on the 28th.
Which one's F again?
F is the small connection
little-
from Colton.
Right.
Yeah.
Or just that little
physical
the
Rock
Rock
Creek
Creek
is,
Trail
yeah.
to the Colton Road
Yeah.
sidewalk.
That's
Okay.
right.
That little.
So, yeah, we had
A little
to,
more challenging than
we
we
had
thought.
to zigzag it. So yeah,
That's right.
we still have quite a bit of stuff going on. And
Okay.
it's not on here, but I did want to update you guys on the embankment slide. Peter and I briefly chatted about it. It so far exceeds the $35,000 that I think maybe get added to the amenities prioritization list and actually included in the future as a CIP item. I think everybody's hearts and heads was in the right place with trying to get to 35,000 every year, but it's such a small number that it's really hard to accomplish anything with that number.
So
How big's the number?
it's like
We're-
80,000
yeah.
or something.
So 2 years worth, 2.5 years worth?
Yeah.
Well, so, but where does that leave the 35 for this year? Is it just
Nowhere.
not going to get spent?
Yeah. But the good thing is that is CTF, and CTF can roll.
So we'll actually have 70,000 next year if the board
The
doesn't
board
change
moved-
anything?
The board moved CTF to
Oh.
to cover the new
Yeah,
park.
the new park.
Plus,
But,
Yeah, we
but
were-
that was supposed to exclude the 35, right?
you're right, that did exclude. The
So does that mean we do have 70,000 next year?
The board didn't allocate 35 next year.
They didn't.
No. Nope. Those funds,
But will we have at least the 35 from this year to spend next year?
I think you guys, if there's a project out there that's under 35, yeah, we can ask the board.
Okay.
So in the budget, CTF is now going towards pool operations and tree and plant and shrub replacement.
I don't like that. That's not what it was really supposed to be spent on, right?
No, CTF, that's at.
No,
that's
not
what
that
most
it
people-
can't be, but is
Most
that,
people spend CTF on.
but that's not how, historically, how the town has spent it.
Right, I think as the general fund has depleted, that the operational costs are being absorbed under. A lot of this was impacted by the park.
Okay. And then one other item not on here, so the December meeting, we usually meet at Old Chicago. In the past, sometimes we have met here briefly to address any agenda items. At this point, I don't think we have any agenda items. Because without a work plan for next year, I mean, we're not gonna jump forward to like the indoor space question. I don't think we're gonna tackle this trail debate in December, because I don't think we'll hold another public engagement or meet with OSAC until January. So if we wanna, we'll probably just do our little holiday party. Do we wanna do it at Old Chicago as we have? Or does anyone have any other suggestions?
I won't be here on the 21st.
Well, if we do it on the 21st, I won't be here.
All right.
Switch up.
There's like 3 of us, or 4 of us if George comes. Woo!
You get lots of pizza.
So we're not gonna have we're not gonna have
Christmas
quorum
Wednesday
anyway,
before
so
Christmas,
that's
right?
it. I mean, we can't do any business anyway, so.
What do we want to do, Delbeck Hills or something different? This is a smaller group. I don't know.
Hold on, I mean, we could move up the date.
While you're looking at that, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What's the status in the exercise equipment for the park to be named?
It's close.
Is
It's
it still in
close.
China?
Nope, it's here.
It's here.
It's here. They
Okay.
did the footers the other day. Supposedly they're in Colorado. And
Yeah.
they should be mounted soon.
Okay, because that was one of the things I was wondering, is that the exercise equipment's gonna go in, and you're gonna bring a different crowd when that equipment goes in for the naming
That's a good point.
thing, right? You
Yeah.
might have more folks. So,
And the views from that side of the park are significantly different than the views. It's such a big park. That's
Yeah.
that's a great point.
So, I mean, would we want to do it on the 14th? Would that change anyone's availability, and we could potentially, since it's not in town hall, we could potentially do another night of the week than Wednesday.
Wednesday's the best. It's my schedule. Wednesday.
Yeah, I just.
Well, the
leave town
13th, we would have
21st, so I can't-
ACC if we have a
14th doesn't
meeting,
work.
but I don't know if we're gonna have a December
I'll
meeting.
be in Virginia that day, so
What day?
the 21st I'll be gone, but before that, I'm
What
I'll be
about-
around
I'm
the
here
week
the
of
14th.
I think I'm out the 14th, but that's typical.
Corey.
okay.
Hey,
You're always
Where-
going.
I schedule around my third Wednesday now.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I
Yeah.
seriously, I flew back last night, got home at like 12, just so
Where
I
are
can come
your
to this
loyal-
meeting.
Just to get the email from.
And I fly out again on Monday, back next week.
Well, I mean, what's everyone's opinion? I mean, do we want to do the 14th or the 21st? I mean, 21st excludes what, two of you? 14th excludes one? So do we just throw Corey to the curb?
Yeah.
I don't care either way, honestly. If it's the 14th, I
I'm
will
good the
go.
14th.
If
I'm
it's
good.
not, I won't have my killings hurt if it's the week of the 21st.
All right,
Doesn't matter.
we'll plan on the 14th unless,
14th, that works.
yeah,
Corey, just reschedule.
unless
it.
Corey comes back with
No,
a
I'll
different
see if I
day.
can figure
Corey,
something out.
your job.
As I
for
always do.
PROSTAC, man.
Come on.
How
Free food.
important
Yeah,
is
it's
designing
free food.
airports? I mean,
Free
come
pizza or
on.
your job, I mean, come on.
Get your priorities
livelihood.
straight. We gotta have some social
Hanging
time.
out.
We can't just
Airport
work
design
all the
is
time.
more
Do you want-
fun some days, but this is actually a really relief for me. It's kind of fun.
All right, so,
We don't-
Do we sort of
Meeting
go 14th?
adjourned.
Try the 14th?
Are we aiming for the 14th?
Yeah.
Corey's gonna
Okay.
redo his calendar?
Are we thinking Delvecchio's, or are we
It's my wife's
thinking
holiday party.
Woody or Buffalo, or you want to just go Chicago?
It's my
You
holiday
guys,
party.
wherever, man.
What do you think?
You guys pick.
So just gotta.
Old C
That's
sometimes
basically
is a little
the
hard to hear. I know we've had
Yes.
that.
But Del Vecchio could almost be too small.
Too small, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we
I
can
just-
take the place over.
Yeah, I was just trying to give.
I don't know how many people they get in there on a Wednesday night.
You
I
don't
have no
tell
idea. I haven't been
anybody,
in there
we can
forever.
probably go outside of town, even though I know that that sometimes can be an issue.
You just said it.
We go to
Panera Bread, there you go. Oh, yeah. My daughters go there like every day.
Well, it's like the towns go to for the retreats, it's like Panera Bread.
I have to ask you.
Need another
The
restaurant.
whole, all these discussions about our planning process and our work plan for next year, so to me, they all still come back to the whole, what's the direction of the trip?
I'm gonna make it.
You know, indoor space.
You already got mine. I don't have
One
any
spot
more
or
for
you
you.
want two spots?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
You want one pool?
We
or
grab
two
that for you.
pools? Or do you want to pool down here?
Dude, my son Noah loved hanging out with you, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
you're good with kids, man, that always helps.
I think we have.
Well,
I don't know, but that's what I'm saying, I'm like, so who recommends
Nice, you know, you're gonna follow behind you, you're gonna do
He's at that cool age where he wants so badly to be
How
involved.
can I implement it, and where can I provide the best
My wife and I have
recommendations?
really been
Because I could
working,
tell
both
you,
of
hey,
us,
we need a
on the
pool.
importance of
Where?
getting involved and
I'm
civics.
like, oh, I can
This
tell
is
you,
really cool.
yes, if we
This is
apply
my
a
Halloween
pool, it should be right there. And if we
Proxies.
apply new meeting
And
space,
the
it
question
should be right
is,
here,
is she
or it
just
should be
collecting
over there.
proxies out of
You know,
Pinterest?
because that's.
I actually
biggest
made a picture, I made
consideration
pictures of my
too,
wife.
right?
She wasn't wearing this picture. She
Like,
was Mr.
they're gonna have
Mr.
nice
Mrs.
space.
So she was Mrs. and she's bow and red lips.
Why are we building over
So I
there?
can find out what-
Which,
Isn't that awesome? And I made the kitchens too, so those are good.
and that's all based on, now I'm having a master plan.
That's the problem. Who's it gonna upset?
Everyone knows,
Upset
like,
you.
it's my
is the coolest thing I think I've ever seen.
Is A,
How
first
does
of all,
Tanya vote with her? She ends up with a huge number of proxies. How does she vote for second?
Yeah, it needs to be.
And even
like you just said, you're like, but that's
I made a
that
Mr. and a
survey
Mrs.
was done 2 years ago and things have changed.
Well, yeah.
Is
Could you
this?
see
But
why out
that's
of
the
that?
problem.
No. I made a
Sandy,
Mr.
is
and a
this-
Mrs. this year as my Halloween costume.
Ah.
Did he leave this for you?
Who?
That, or is that somebody's?
That's not mine, I don't know.
Pitch it.
So you sent something out?
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we'll decide on the location.
Site meetings.
I don't know what it is.
I'm sure you call.
This is my wife's holiday.
It's not your notes, I don't know whose it
It's
is.
what?
The 14th. That was my contract. My holiday party.
So it
was
wasn't
the
gonna
10th
be
versus the
here
14th.
in Dallas. It was gonna be-
Actually,
wanna go with
I
your
haven't
wife?
Yeah,
verified
whether he
yet,
wants to
but
go with his
I
wife.
will,
I'd rather be
I
in
will
Dallas
be
and get some good
informed
mix
as
of
well.
Whether he wants to hang out with us.
See, here's my Portland schedule from yesterday.
Corey, I would much rather be in Dallas. and
I will
get
be
good
in
mix of
Portland
food
that
than
week,
in
that
Florida.
week, that week, that week.
No, there's not. I'm from Texas. This is not.
Actually, yeah, that reminds me. The 14th, I think I'm open. Because I have to be out there.
Because you don't have postage up on it.
Actually, I'll be out there the 13th, 14th.
Look at your blank postage notes. You're just waiting.
That's the holiday, 26th, 27th, 28th, 30th. The pinks are a holiday.
Oh, you're.
Hi, boss.
I saw your calendar.
It was Monday, yeah, it was on Monday, Tuesday. It was
Yeah,
one,
man.
2, 3, 4. But we were like, it's a 3-month outlook, and we were sticking Post-its of all our meetings. And this morning I flew back and already a bunch of those changed. Just in the yesterday with the port.
Just that little bit.
Back in the day, it was like, we're gonna cancel this one and open these instead. And I'm like, oh. So I have to be back out there in like, actually, I have to be out there the next 3 weeks. Well, so I go back on next week.
Holiday party, you can't defend the rate cost competition.